My House of Horrors Chapter 481 to 490. The smarter a person was, the prouder they would be. Yang Cheng wanted to clear the scenario. Even if it was just once, it was a kind of proof. I disagree. Lao Zhou was the first to argue. When we came in, you said that we were teammates, but now that something has happened, you change your attitude. Don't you think you've crossed the line? Quote. Lao Zhou, Duan Yu smiled at the group apologetically. She pulled on Lao Zhou's sleeve lightly. It appeared like Lao Zhou was an impulsive and righteous person in real life. This kind of thing happened often, and as his girlfriend, she was used to it. I also don't think we should just abandon the two of them. The person who spoke was Xiao Li. Because he was also a solo visitor and did not have a group to take care of him, he was worried that if something happened to him, he might face the same fate as Fan Dade, being mercilessly abandoned. I'm just voicing my opinion. As for the actual choice, I'll leave it to the majority. Yang Cheng raised her hand. I think we should return to the junction and choose another path. When he said that, Wang Yan and Li Shui raised their hands. Only three. Now, who agrees to find the chef and his brother, raise your hand. Lao Zhou was the first to raise his hand. Then Duan Yu and Xiao Li raised their hands. Similarly, all three of them agreed. The rest of you, stop wasting time. Hurry up and give your opinion. It's not a problem to find the chef, but the medical student has a point. Bai Cholan offered a third suggestion. I also suggest we go find the chef, but we can't take the path that the chef has taken. Then he turned to Anan. What do you guys think? Anan had been thinking. In the end, he turned to Lao Zhou. We're a team. Disagreements among us will only weaken us, so I also choose to go find the chef. He and Huya both raised their hands. 5-3. Let's go. When they were counting, Anan suddenly realized something. He looked around. Wait a minute. Where's the tail? Quote. Is he still in the room? The few of them turned and ran into the warehouse. They stepped over the junk on the floor and passed through the crowded shelves. They searched the whole warehouse, but they did not see Tails. Where is he? He was behind us just now. Darkness descended, and it wasn't two people who disappeared, but three. An indescribable chill crept up everyone's body. They stood rooted to the ground, and some of them had already begun to retreat. They had made all the necessary preparations, but the moment they entered, the team had already lost a quarter of its members. How were they supposed to continue? A living person can't just disappear into thin air. There has to be a hidden path hidden inside this room. Anan did not give up. The boss wouldn't build a building that is completely useless. Perhaps Tails discovered the secret of this room, triggered some kind of mechanism, and fell into the secret passage. Huya thought back to where Tails had last stood. She walked to the printer and looked at the blinking light. Her eyes moved down and saw a few pieces of paper on the ground. I don't think there were so many papers before. She squatted down and picked up all the papers. The first few had a blurry silhouette, but the last one had 3 words written on it, look behind you. It was a simple word, but in this unique environment, it brought about a different kind of fear. Looks like Tails did find something, but how did she trigger the mechanism? Where is this mechanism? Quote. Huya picked up the paper that had fallen from the printer and looked at it. Is it related to this thing? She waved behind her, and the few of them worked together to move the printer away. On the wall that was blocked by the printer, they saw a deep hole that led to who knew where. The edge of the hole was irregular like it had been dug out by hand. Tails. Anan called into the hole, but there was no reply. No, I need to confirm Tails' safety. Huya took out her phone and called Tails' number. It rang more than 10 times, but there was still no answer. When we came in, we said to keep the phone on so that we can keep in touch. Did something happen to her? The phone can't go through. Then, shall we go in to take a look? Anan was also worried. Follow me. Huya was more courageous than Anan. She turned on the flashlight on her phone and bent down to enter the hole. Hey! Yang Cheng originally wanted to tell them not to use their phone, but seeing how Huya was not going to listen to her, she softened her tone. Don't make a rash decision. There might be something waiting for us at the other side of the hole. You can choose another path, but the two of us will go this way. Huya was worried about Tails' safety. She raised her phone and bent forward. The hole was slippery, and she moved very slowly. Can't help it. I have to listen to Big Sister. Annan followed her into the hole. The rest stood outside, and they were hesitant. We should go as well. We can't split up anymore. Yang Cheng felt helpless. The situation had completely gone out of control. Brother Bai, should we go in? Xiaoli wanted to build a good relationship with Bai Cholan and suck up to Bai Cholan, so he was very polite with his words. Since the disappearance of Fan Date and Fan Kong, we've been on the passive side, and the situation will only get worse. Bai Chulin's tone was not that optimistic. We can't split up anymore, and we can't stay at the same spot for too long. That will give the boss time to set up the specters and props. We have to take control of the situation to have a chance of leaving this place. Then, he followed Annan into the hole. Xiao Li, Duan Yu, and Lao Zhou followed closely behind. There were only 3 medical students left in the warehouse. When they first entered the underground morgue, they had been the leader, but several minutes had passed, and no one had listened to them anymore. Something doesn't feel right. Yang Cheng looked at the few teams that had already entered, and she felt tired. It's fine, just the 3 of us can still clear this scenario. Li Shui comforted Yang Cheng. The 3 wanted to say something else when they heard the sound of a human head bouncing. They turned to look, and the lights in the corridor seemed to be going off again, and the human head seemed to be following them. Whatever, we need to leave this place first. The 3 medical students brought up the rear, and all the visitors crawled into the hole. After walking for several meters, light appeared before them. Huya carefully poked her head out. At the end of the hole were 3 paths that were painted white. Another fork. Which path will Tails choose? Huya called Tails' number again, but there was no answer. What's going on? Gritting her canine teeth, this elegant chief editor was a little angry. The lonely and helpless Tails walked alone in a completely dark tunnel. Her eyes were filled with tears as she gripped her phone tightly. She seemed to be talking to someone. Sister Huya, where are you? I've walked for a long time already, but I still haven't seen you. Quote. I can hear footsteps. Keep walking. Huya's voice came from the phone. Okay. Tails shuddered as she slowly moved her feet. With one hand on the wall, her body slowly disappeared into the darkness. How come I still haven't seen you? Don't be afraid, Tails. Keep moving, I'll be with you. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Huya's voice came from Tails' phone. It was warm and gentle, like sunlight shining into her heart. Sister Huya, listen to me. The ghost is hiding inside the printer. It dragged me to the cave. You'll see it when you move the printer away. Okay, don't worry, we'll meet again soon. Hearing the voice on the phone, Tails was still worried. You have to take the left path. When I exited the cave, there was the sound of rolling wheels behind me. Something was chasing me. I didn't think twice and ran in a random direction. I only called you after the sound disappeared. Quote. We're already there. Just keep walking. Don't be afraid, and don't hang up. Huya's voice kept coming from the phone like a caring big sister. With the accompaniment of the voice, Tails felt her body regaining its strength, and she walked deeper into the darkness. I can't get through to the phone. Annan stood in the middle of the junction and looked at the 2 white paths. He was deep in thought. Which way should we go? This question had been bothering him for a long time. The underground morgue was different from other scenarios. It was like a complicated maze, and they were deep inside it. No one is answering. The boss is very careful. There should be a signal jammer installed in this scenario. Xiaoli tried to use science to explain. It's not a signal jammer. The signal is full, but no one is answering. Huya put her phone away. She stood next to Annan, and there was worry in her eyes. Tails probably dropped her phone somewhere when she was running for her life. Huya gave the most realistic answer, and that was the explanation she gave herself. What should we do next? This is another junction. Which way should we go? Yang Cheng looked at Huya, who was using the phone inside the haunted house, and he subconsciously moved away from her. Something was wrong, and he did not want to stand out anymore. He tried to keep a low profile. His eyes scanned the people around him, and the anxiety in Yang Cheng's heart grew stronger. He paid close attention to find the source of that anxiety. There are no signs on the two roads. They are both painted white. Based on what the medical student said, they are used to transport corpses. They are meant for the dead. We'd better not enter them. After Xiao Li finished speaking, he glanced at Bai Chulan. He probably wanted to get Bai Chulan's support, but unfortunately, Bai Chulan's attention was not on him from beginning to end. I can only take a gamble. Huya and Anan did not discuss it with the others. The two of them looked at each other and chose the path on the left. Tail's phone rang, but no one answered. She probably dropped it while she was running. For her to flee in such a hurry without even picking up her phone, it meant that she must have been chased by something terrifying, most likely a small car with wheels. In that case, she would definitely choose the passage that was closer to her, and the passage on the left is closer to her. Quote. Your speculation sounds more like self-deception to me. It doesn't hold water at all. After all, Yang Cheng was young. He could not take it anymore, so he retorted, what if the monster chasing tails came from the left tunnel? She can only run to the right, and if we go to the left tunnel, we'll run into the monsters. Quote. In comparison, the chance of tails entering the left tunnel is higher. That's enough for me. Huya and Anan walked into the left tunnel without turning back. The two editors insisted on leaving. To ensure the integrity of the team, even though Yang Cheng was not satisfied, he had to follow. The team of 12 had become 9. If they continued to split up, the chance of clearing the scenario would be even slimmer. Sighing softly, Yang Chen felt more and more like he could not read the boss. Based on my understanding of the boss, after he gets the picture, the real horror of this scenario will be revealed. This is just the appetizer. Just thinking about it made Yang Chen's forehead sweat uncontrollably. It was obvious that the enemy hadn't used their full strength yet. It had only been a few minutes since they entered the scene, and the team that was originally united as a rope had already fallen apart. If this continued, it would be a problem to enter the central hub to find the picture, much less clear the scenario. The boss of this haunted house is too crazy. He doesn't leave any room for survival. Yang Cheng sighed internally, but his expression did not change. He was worried that his emotions would affect the others. I can't rely on others. At a time like this, I can only focus on myself and prioritize my own people. Yang Cheng turned back to look. The group of visitors had split into several smaller groups. The two editors walked at the front, Bai Cholan and Xiao Li walked together, and at the back of the group was Lao Zhou and Duan Yu. The two editors refused to listen to advice. They have their own way of thinking. Bai Cholan is a prideful person, and it feels like he's very cunning. Yang Chen looked around before his gaze finally landed on Zhou. This young couple are kind people. The husband has a strong sense of justice and is generous while the wife has a weak personality. These two are very suitable to be teammates. There is a need for me to get to know them better. Yang Cheng whispered something to Li Shui before he slowed down and walked to Lao Zhou's side. Realizing that Yang Cheng had voluntarily come to chat with him, Lao Zhou showed great caution. He still remembered Yang Cheng's cold words when the chef ran away. He did not treat Yang Cheng nicely. From his perspective, if Yang Cheng could abandon the chef, she would abandon him in the future. Why are you here? Lao Zhou's face was drawn, but it was Duan Yu who tried to persuade him. Yang Cheng apologized in a whisper and told him about her difficulties. Then she seriously analyzed the situation for Lao Zhou, and in the end, Lao Zhou's expression softened. However, when Yang Chen suggested to form an alliance with Zhou rejected him without a second thought. When Duan Yu asked, Zhou used a voice that was loud enough for Yang Chen to hear and said, forming an alliance with them is like asking a tiger for its skin. We're not that cunning. Otherwise, we'll be betrayed by them and still count the money for them. Duan Yu nodded with a hint of understanding, but Yang Cheng could only smile bitterly. However, the more Lao Zhou said that, the more convinced he was of the idea of allying with Lao Zhou. He did not know why, but the anxiety in his heart grew stronger. It felt like danger was lurking around him, even hiding among the visitors. Therefore, at this time, he needed to gather more power to deal with the unexpected. While Yang Cheng continued to persuade Lao Zhou, there was a new change in the corridor ahead. The smell of formalin thickened, and a cold wind blew out from an open steel door at the end of the corridor. Tail. Huya walked at the front of the group. She called out to the half-open door, but there was no reply. Let's go take a look. Quote. The wall lamp gave off a dim light. Huya moved forward alone. She stuck close to the wall and slowly approached the iron door. The door was full of mottled rust, and there was a blood-like liquid that was flowing out. What is this room used for? Quote. Huya moved her feet and took another step forward. Her body leaned forward, but she did not touch the door. She adjusted her vision to see what was behind the door. However, before she could get a good look, a drop of liquid fell from the ceiling and landed on the back of her hand. It was sticky, like blood, but it seemed to be mixed with something else. It gave off an indescribable smell. Leak. She slowly raised her head, and the light around them dimmed slightly. The door trembled slightly. Careful. Yang Cheng shouted, and the wall lamps behind them started to go off again. One after another, they were extremely fast. They were like ravenous beasts that were crazily pouncing over. Without any time to prepare, the darkness swallowed them all. Everyone, squat down. Stay where you are. Yang Cheng was anxious, but there was nothing she could do. Last time, when the lights went out, 3 people had disappeared. Who knew who would disappear this time? Quote. The corridor was completely dark, and it was very quiet. She could hear the breathing and heartbeats of her companions. Everyone squatted on the ground, and no one dared to move. In the darkness, a cold wind blew. She could see a shadow moving at the end of the corridor before disappearing. The monster seemed to have blended in with them. Time slowed down. The thumping of heartbeats echoed in her ears, and combined with the strange background music, the fear was magnified infinitely. Creak. A shrill sound came from Huya's position, and the door before her was pushed open. Who would open the door at a time like this? The steel door was pushed open, and the smell of formalin permeated the air. There was another sound in the corridor. Drip, drip. The liquid fell from above and landed on the ground. The sound came closer and closer to Huya before stopping before her. It was pitch black, and nothing could be seen. Only the continuous dripping sound could be heard. The thing was standing next to me. Huya's palms were soaked in sweat. An invisible pressure came over her. She mustered her courage and raised her hand. She reached forward, but her fingers touched nothing. It should be here. The voice came from here. Quote. Huya was very sure. Her hand continued to move forward. Drip. Another drop of liquid fell, this time on her arm. I can't touch it. It's still moving and dripping. Could it be, it's above my head? Huya's eyes slowly adapted to the darkness. She looked up and saw a blurry humanoid shadow on the ceiling above her. It looked like it had just crawled out of a pool. There were still water stains on its body, and its limbs stuck to the wall like a gecko. Its head poked out, and its hollow face rested on top of Huya's head. It looked like it was preparing to bite Huya's face off and take it away. This is. What the hell? Huya's breathing stopped. Her legs remained in a half-squatting position. Her body was a little numb, but her mind was still very clear. This woman's courage was probably the biggest among all of them. The thing is above my head. Huya screamed. She grabbed the phone in her pocket, aimed it above her head, and flung it. Pa! The phone hit the wall. There was a flash of light behind Huya, and Anand switched on the flashlight that came with the phone. When the light shone on, the monster on the ceiling had already run away. He only saw a humanoid shadow crawling on the ceiling. The sound of rolling wheels came closer. Fan Date and Fan Kong could not run anymore. They had already lost their sense of direction, and they did not wish to clear the scenario. They just wanted to get rid of the thing behind them, catch their breath, and rest. Come in. Quick. The two of them crawled down a corridor that was painted white, and they saw a half-open steel door. On it were 4 Chinese characters, morgue number 2. Without looking, Fan Dade dragged Fan Kong and ran into it. Then Fan Dade slammed the door shut. Brother, slow down. Quote. Fan Kong struggled free from Fan Dade's grasp. He gasped for air and collapsed to the ground with his back against the wall. He had not been so active in the past few years. The door was closed, and several seconds later, the sound of rolling wheels passed by the door and slowly left. We're saved. Fan Dade looked like he had just been fished out of the water. His whole body was soaked in sweat. His legs were weak, and he collapsed to the ground. I'm too tired. I need to rest. Seeing his brother's stubbornness, Fan Kong did not expose him. He sat beside his brother, gasping for air. Why did you do that? Why did you have to come to a haunted house to suffer? We're a family of cowards. It's not like you don't know how our parents died, so why did you have to come here to suffer? Quote. I'm so annoyed by your attitude. No one is born cowardly. Furthermore, it has nothing to do with our parents that I brought you to the haunted house. I just wanted you to come out for a walk. Don't just stay at home playing games. Look at how depressed you are. Brother, I wasn't playing a game. Fan Kong thought about it and finally told the truth. According to rumors, the game was created by a murderer, and it hides evidence of his child abuse. However, temporarily, no one has been able to decipher it. Stop finding excuses. I'm your brother, how can I not know you? Fan Dade waved his hands. It's just a broken up, right? If you lost your girlfriend, you can find another one. Why would a man worry about not having a wife? Quote. Where did you learn that from? Fan Kong was too lazy to explain to his brother. I'm not going to argue with you anymore. Let's not think about clearing the scenario. We'll just stay here for another 30 minutes and wait for the boss to come save us. That's not a good idea, right? What's wrong with that? In any case, even if you kill me, I won't leave this place again. Quote. Before Fan Chong finished, a crisp sound came from the row of morgues next to the morgue. The fat on his body jiggled, and he shivered. What was that sound? I don't know, but it sounds like it came from that morgue. Fan Dade climbed up from the ground. The two brothers leaned against the door, and they were panicking. I don't think we should go over to take a look. As long as we don't trigger all the traps, it's the same as there being no traps. The sweat on Fan Kong's face had not even dried when a new layer of cold sweat appeared. You have a point. Neither of the brothers showed any intention of getting close to the morgue, but the thing inside the morgue did not plan to let them go. The lights in the room flickered, and a scratching sound came from one of the morgues. It sounded like it was trying to find a gap to escape. Something inside the morgue wanted to come out. The nails scratched at the gap of the iron cabinet like it was slowly searching for the switch. The shrill sound kept ringing in their ears. The thing inside the cabinet scratched for a long time, and it slowly became agitated, releasing a low panting sound. Brother, do you hear that sound? Yes, it's probably an employee hiding inside the morgue. When we get close, he'll suddenly rush out to scare us. Fan Dade pretended to be calm. I've seen this many times, there's no need to be afraid. No, I'm thinking about another problem. Fan Kong thought more. Don't you think the emotions of the actors at this haunted house are especially on point? I mean, in terms of acting skills. Fan Dade was reminded of the faceless monster that had been hiding in the dark earlier, and his hair stood on end. Somewhat. There are rarely any switches inside the morgue. After all, this is a place prepared for the dead. Fan Chong listened to the panting that came from inside the cupboard, and his heart raced. Earlier, we heard the sound of nails scratching at the door. It sounded like a dead person coming back to life. It couldn't find the switch, and the breathing became rapid. This is a gradual process, like there is really a monster inside the morgue that has come back to life. With a bitter smile on his face, Fan Chong gripped the door. If I'm not mistaken, the monsters inside the cupboard might resort to more drastic measures like banging on the cupboard door to create a louder noise. That will not only attract the monsters outside, but the monsters inside this room will also come out to attack us. When that happens, we'll be surrounded by enemies from the front and back, and we'll really be dead. Quote. Then, what good suggestion do you have? I'll listen to you. Fan Dade is a chef. Even though his brother is fat, he's much smarter than Fan Dade. Those who have played survival games know that there is a default rule in this type of game, and that is to not stay in one place for too long. This rule was aimed at those cowards, preventing them from hiding somewhere and passively playing the game. Fan Kong wiped the sweat from his forehead. The haunted house at New Century Park is famous for its scares, and the boss is well versed in psychology and has a horrible personality. He will definitely introduce a similar mechanism into his haunted house. Quote. Then tell me, are we going to go out later? Fan Dade felt a little regretful. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have run so fast. Now that he was separated from his teammates, they were in a very bad situation. Not later, but now. Fan Kong didn't dare to stay any longer. While the monster in the cupboard hadn't come out and the sound of the wheels had faded away, he quickly left. Quote. Leave now. Quote. Yes, this should be the only chance that the boss has given us. If we miss it, we'll be facing something even scarier. Quote. When Fan Kong spoke, the breathing in the cupboard became more urgent, and the sound of nails scratching at the iron door became louder. The thing inside the cupboard seemed to be suffocating. The nails cracked, and blood seeped out from the gaps of the cupboard. The monster inside the cupboard seemed to be in great pain, and its emotions were completely out of control. Suddenly, a loud bang came from the cupboard, like someone had slammed their head into the cupboard door. Fan Dade and Fan Kong's hearts squeezed. They looked at each other, and they knew very well that Fan Kong's prophecy was slowly becoming a reality. Leave now. Almost at the same time that Fan Kong shouted that, the sound of rolling wheels came from the corridor outside. I knew it. Fan Kong still underestimated the boss's power. The boss had indeed given them a chance, but it was only for a few seconds. What now? The sound of wheels outside the door triggered the scary memory in Fan Dade's mind. He leaned against the door and looked out. He saw all the lights on the wall go off, and the corridor was plunged into darkness. Only the sound of rolling wheels could be heard. The car that carried some kind of special meaning was approaching, and the sound coming from the cupboard in the morgue grew louder. The scariest thing was, initially, only one cupboard made the sound, but it soon spread, and the two cupboards next to it also started to make the same sound. Time passed in hesitation. Fan Kong and Fan Dade still had not made a choice. At this crucial moment, they looked at each other, and they were panicking. They were just there to visit their brother's haunted house, who knew they would run into such a scary situation. The sound of wheels came closer, but it did not slow down. Fan Kong and the chef had given up resisting. They prayed silently, hoping that the monster outside the door would not discover them and give them another chance. 10 seconds later, the two's faces were blanched. The miracle that they prayed for did not happen. The sound of wheels suddenly disappeared when they passed Morgue No. 2. The car appeared to be parked right outside the door. Cold sweat continued to pour down their faces. The monster that had been chasing them was finally going to show its true face. Fan Kong and Fan Dade leaned against the gap of the door. They did not even dare to breathe too loudly as they focused on the door. Several seconds later, there was still no movement outside. It was like the car had never appeared in the first place, like it was just a figment of Fan Dade's imagination. That thing has left. Fan Kong stuck his ear to the door and listened quietly. Should we go out to take a look? The cupboard behind them started to shake. The monster kept using its head to knock the cupboard door, and the rust on the old cupboard kept peeling. Fan Dade was really worried that something would escape from the cupboard and charge at them. His 5 fingers gripped the doorknob and slowly pushed it down. The spring turned inside the lock, and just as it was about to spring open, something slammed heavily into the door. Bang! Quote. The loud noise scared Fan Dade so much that he let go of his hand and took a few steps back in succession. That thing is still outside. Quote. The monster outside the door was no less intelligent than a normal person. After its ambush failed, it no longer tried to hide itself and slammed the door hysterically. The door lock rattled, and the morgue behind him shook. Fan Dade stood in the middle of the room, and the blood vessels on his neck became obvious due to the tension. He did not know where to hide, and his body became weaker and weaker. He involuntarily took a step back. Brother, don't go over. Fan Kong's warning was too late. Blood flowed through the gap of the cabinet door. When Fan Dade was a few meters away from the morgue, the old cabinet door was slammed open, and a bloody face rushed out. Its arms were open as if it wanted to grab Fan Dade and drag him into the morgue. Fan Dade felt a chill run through his entire body. He didn't have time to think and just ran for his life. All the mortuary cabinets in the room started to shake, and blood oozed out. The whole room seemed to be dyed red. Go. Let's go. We'll die if we're stuck here. Fan Dade and Fan Kong ran toward the only exit. They twisted the doorknob, and the steel door opened. Before the two ran out, several shadows rushed out from the darkness. They all had strange expressions like the faces did not belong to them. Run! Quote. Fandade screamed at the top of his lungs. He gripped his fists, and the 1.9 meters tall man decided to fight it out with these monsters. With a strange tone that even he did not understand coming out of his mouth, Fandade charged at the monsters, but before his fists touched the shadows, something that he would never forget happened. The people's faces were slowly falling off. This was the first time he had seen a human face falling off. What the f***ck? This completely exceeded his expectation and tolerance, and it caused him to break down. The courage that he had summoned with so much difficulty disappeared instantly. He wanted to run back into the room, but when he turned back to look, he had a deeper understanding of the word despair. The cupboard doors in morgue number 2 were slammed open, and one after another, monsters with the shape of living humans crawled out. The smell of formalin tickled their nostrils, and their vision was slowly taken over by red. Fandade and Fan Kong collapsed to the ground surrounded by the monsters. Half a minute later, all the monsters disappeared like nothing had happened. If not for the brothers Fandade and Fan Kong who were foaming at the mouth and fainted, no one would have realized something scary had happened there. Time slowly passed, and at the end of the corridor, a few people in white coats walked over. I feel sorry for them. Quote. Yes, even as ghosts would feel uncomfortable seeing this, much less them. Quote. We can't just leave them here. Let's try to resuscitate them. One of the doctors leaned his ear close to Fandade and Fan Kong's nose to listen for their breathing. Then he checked their carotid arteries. Their physical condition is not bad, and they don't have any heart disease. Quote. 5 minutes later, Fan Kong slowly opened his eyes, and his vision started to clear up. Where am I? Quote. There were no monsters or dead bodies around him. He stood up shakily, and he finally remembered what had happened earlier. Didn't I faint already? He held the wall and looked around. He realized that he was still trapped inside morgue number 2. The sound of nails scratching came from inside the cupboard, and the sound of wheels came from outside the door. What had happened earlier was about to repeat itself. Wait a minute. This is not right. Have I forgotten something? How come it feels like I've experienced this before? Quote. Big brother, wake up. Fan Kong shook Fandade's shoulders. After a while, Fandade finally woke up. Where are we? His eyes finally focused. The large and muscular Fandade was lying on his side on the ground. He looked very weak. Seeing his big brother in this state, Fan Kong's lips moved. He did not have the heart to continue. Have we been escorted out of the haunted house by the workers? Fan Kong did not speak for a long time. His expression was like he was possessed. Fandade realized that something was wrong. He struggled to get up and looked around. The steel door, the morgue, and the sound of wheels lingering in his ears. This feeling of déjà vu caused Fandade to be unable to process it for a moment. This scene, have we experienced it before? The sound of nails scratching the door grew louder, and the sound of heavy breathing came from inside the morgue. Without waiting for Fan Kong's answer, Fandade already had the answer in his heart. The sound of wheels whistled and stopped at the door. The morgue doors were knocked open, and blood splattered everywhere. More monsters than before crawled out. With his legs weak, Fandade leaned against the door of morgue number 2, and his hands started to shake uncontrollably. The door behind him was slammed into, and his body shook along with the door. Fandade felt like his bones were about to shatter. Stop it. Aren't you guys way too fast? I just woke up. Quote. Fandade wanted to cry, but compared to him, Fan Kong appeared calmer. For a smart person, they would not make the same mistake twice. Wiping away the cold sweat on his forehead, Fan Kong collapsed to the ground like his legs were cramping, and he fell behind Fandade. Brother, if you wake up from your coma later, remember not to wake me up. Just let me be unconscious for a while longer. After saying the last sentence, Fan Chong's eyelids rolled up, and he fainted straight away. Before Fandade realized what was happening, the lights in the room went off. Little brother. Xiao Chong. Fan Kong. Quote. The morgue door was knocked open, and Fandade was surrounded by multiple shadows. The whole underground scenario could hear Fandade's screams. Half a minute later, the lights came back on, and the corridor returned to normal. The shadow had dissipated, and Fandade's body twitched in the corner. He could no longer spit out more white foam. Slowly opening his eyes, Fan Kong, who was lying next to Fandade, opened his eyes. While he was afraid, there was a trace of excitement in his heart. As long as he pretended to be dead, he wouldn't be attacked by the ghosts. No, perhaps it was my big brother who attracted all the firepower. Thinking back to what had happened earlier, Fan Kong's scalp went numb. I need to leave this place as soon as possible. Anywhere else is better than here. He struggled to stand up and shook Fandade's shoulders. Big brother, wake up. Quick. Quote. After panicking for a long time, Fandade did not seem to be getting better. Fan Kong's heart was racing. He grabbed Fandade's arms and tried to carry him. He just pulled Fandade up when he heard a sigh coming from the end of the corridor. Fainting due to shock is a sudden fainting. The first thing you need to do is make sure he's lying flat on the ground, make sure there's ventilation, and then start CPR. Moving his body now won't do him any good. Quote. This was an unfamiliar voice, and it did not belong to any other visitor. Fan Kong did not hear what the person said. When the person spoke, he let go and lay down where he was. Fandade's body also landed on the ground, and the two corpses were lying in the middle of the corridor. The person in the distance did not seem to expect that his kind reminder would cause the person to faint. A few seconds later, the lights on the wall dimmed, and gusts of cold wind blew in the corridor. 4 doctors in white coats, masks, and gloves walked over. They were covered up so tightly that their faces could not be seen. Why did he faint? Wasn't he fine earlier? Was he too sensitive? Quote. This big man's physical condition is not bad. He fell several times, but his skin did not break. He's so sturdy. The last time I encountered someone like this was at autopsy room No. 7. He was a construction worker, and it was very easy for him to shave off the fat. Quote. Stop wasting time. Save him first. It's too dangerous to just leave him in the middle of the road. One of the kind doctors went to save Fandade, and the rest surrounded Fan Kong. The cold wind caressed his face, and his body was cold, but Fan Kong could not stop the sweat from pouring out of his forehead. I feel like I'm surrounded. What should I do? What should a normal person do in this situation? Quote. Feeling a chill on his neck, one of the doctors said with surprise, is he fine? Why did he faint? Quote. His heart is beating so fast, so he should be faking it. Then doesn't that mean he has seen us? Why don't we? When the few doctors were discussing, Fan Kong, who was lying on the ground, opened his eyes slightly, and they happened to meet the sharp gazes of the few doctors. As expected, he is faking it. The leading doctor looked the youngest, and his gaze was the scariest. Normally, I hate people who play dirty tricks. With an awkward smile, the fat on Fan Kong's face started to jiggle. His fat hands pressed on the ground, and he tried to sit up. I didn't expect this haunted house to have a doctor. This is rare internationally, right? No wonder this is the scariest haunted house in Zhejiang. Quote. He looked at the doctor who was trying to save his big brother. No matter how he looked at it, he felt like something was wrong, but he could not pinpoint what was wrong. Surrounded by the doctors, his body became colder. Fan Kong forced a happy smile. Gentlemen, I won't disturb you anymore. Please continue. He reached his hand into his pocket, and his finger moved on the screen. His body retreated. He did not want his big brother anymore. The best solution was to escape on his own. Wait a minute. The few doctors spoke at the same time, and their eyes focused on the hand that Fan Kong had reached into his pocket. Fan Kong knew that he was in trouble, so he moved faster. After turning a corner, he realized that it was a dead end, and the exit was blocked by the doctors. You're overweight, and you've been scared for a long time. Your heart rate is not normal. I have professional equipment with me, and I hope you can cooperate with me to do some tests. After the doctor said that, he was not so sure himself. There should be equipment, if I remember correctly. Are you going to treat me? Fan Kong held the phone and slowly approached the doctor. When he was about 1 meter away from the doctor, he suddenly picked up speed. I appreciate your kindness, but I know my own body better than anyone else. You don't need to worry about me. Fan Kong's 100-kilogram body rammed into the few doctors. He was also scared out of his wits, and he wanted to fight with his life on the line. His arms moved randomly, and they brushed against the doctor's coat. Fan Kong felt like his fingertips had brushed against something. Fan Kong's flailing arms landed on the leading doctor. It was unclear what he had touched, but it felt wet. Why are all the doctor's coats wet? Tilting his head to the side, Fan Kong glanced at the doctor from the corner of his eyes. The place where his fingers had landed on the doctor's collar had sunk in, and it did not recover. His neck. The image before him was scary. The doctor was covered in uniform, but there was a sunken part on his neck. It looked very unnatural. It was like the person inside the uniform was not a person but a mud statue. The uniform sunk in, and the doctor's collar was slightly open. A thick stench of formalin drifted out, and it made it hard for Fan Kong to open his eyes. Energetic, disorganized speech, and disorganized behavior, these are the signs of mania. Looks like you are seriously ill. The leading doctor's sunken collar slowly recovered. He signaled to the two doctors next to him. Stop him. We'll help him do a full examination. I'm not sick. Fan Chong was in despair. At other haunted houses, the worst that could happen was the patient fainting, but at this haunted house, even if the patient fainted, they could still be saved. The thing that confused him the most was, why would someone with such great medical skill become an extra at a haunted house? I'm really not sick. Don't come any closer. Hearing Fan Kong's scream, the leading doctor shook his head. Whether you're sick or not is not up to you but the doctor. If you don't believe me, you can go to the nearest hospital for a full examination. Fan Kong's scream echoed in the underground scenario. All the visitors who heard it could not help but shiver. They turned to look at the source of the scream with pity. This voice is familiar. Xiao Li squatted on the ground and whispered to Bai Cholan, who was next to him. Looks like something has happened to Fan Kong and Fan Dade. We don't need to go and save them anymore. Bai Chulan's tone was still as cold as ever. He ignored everyone like a lone wolf. The lights in the corridor lit up again, and the monster lying on top of Huya's head had already disappeared. What was that? Anan jogged over to help Huya up. Did you get a good look at it? Huya shook her head. He doesn't seem to have a face. His head is empty. Your head is empty. That shouldn't be a stuntman. Could it be a robot? Anan looked up at the ceiling. There were still water stains on the white ceiling. This haunted house looks so old-fashioned, but it has so many new technologies integrated into it. The boss sure is willing to invest so much money into it. Isn't he afraid that it will all go to waste? Xiao Li took out his phone and secretly recorded this important discovery. Then he pressed the send button and sent this information out. That's right, this haunted house's boss sure works hard. I hear the props inside a haunted house are different from those in other industries. They can't be recycled, so other than those in the same industry, no one will want them. Lao Zhou and Duan Yu were very close to Xiao Li, so they had seen everything that he had done. With a smile on his face, Lao Zhou let go of Duan Yu's hand. The two of them stood on either side of Xiao Li, sandwiching him in the middle. When Xiao Li saw Lao Zhou walk over, he turned back to greet him. He had a good impression of Lao Zhou. From how he saw it, the most reliable person was Bai Cholan, and the nicest people were Lao Zhou and his wife. The lights are back on. We should hurry and find Tails. Yang Cheng glanced at the time. I've made some calculations. The time between the lights going off is 3.5 minutes. I'm not sure if this time is fixed or random. If it is, I suggest we find a relatively safe place in the next 3 minutes and survive the next lights out. Yang Cheng's eyes scanned the group, and a strange light crossed his eyes. After saying that, he lowered his head. Fan Kong and Fan Dade are already in trouble. Now, only the few of us are left. Let's gather together. Just the few of us, let's see what the monster in the dark looks like and confirm what kind of danger we will run into after lights out. After that, we'll plan our next step. There was a speculation in his heart. Combining it with his previous experience at the haunted house, the way Yang Cheng looked at the other visitors changed. He did not dare voice his thoughts, afraid that he might be used by the hidden person, so he could only search for Tails on his own. He had to find that person before something happened to the next visitor. Yang Chen was very smart, but if one were to calculate his age, he was only a university freshman, just 20 years old. He placed great importance on clearing the haunted house. This was a challenge and proof for him. However, it was different for other visitors, like Anan and Huya. For them, compared to clearing the haunted house, finding the lost tails was more important. There are only two paths, and the chance of tails taking this path is very high. Anan did not continue, but his meaning was clear. The two editors from the scariest magazine walked away. Bai Cholan obviously did not take Yang Cheng's words seriously. He and Xiao Li followed closely behind them. Yang, how about we just ignore them and go on our own? Wang Yan was a hot-tempered person. We're not that close to them. If they want to find tails, they can do it on their own. It's better if we stick together. Yang Cheng stared at Anan and Huya's backs, and his gaze shifted slightly. He was reminded of a detail. When they signed the disclaimers, Lao Zhou's group and the three medical students had signed them inside the haunted house, but he did not see any of the other visitors sign the disclaimers. Yes, they came in directly, so they didn't have to sign the disclaimer. A whirlpool appeared in Yang Cheng's heart, pulling at all his memory. In other words, the person I'm looking for should be among the 6 who entered the haunted house later, and some of them didn't sign the disclaimer at all. Fear slowly crawled up his body, and Yang Cheng narrowed his eyes. He thought back to his conversation with the boss. They wanted to gather 10 people before entering the haunted house. If they did not gather 10 people in the end, was it possible that the boss had his own employees infiltrate the haunted house to disguise as visitors? This was not the first time the boss had done something like that. He had encountered it once when he visited Muyang High School. Understood. A cold smile appeared on Yang Cheng's lips. No wonder I feel like I'm being led by the nose, and all my suggestions are refuted. So, there's a ghost among our group. He had discovered the boss's weakness, but he did not reveal this secret to anyone. He focused all his attention on the few visitors who entered the haunted house later. The editor, the mechanic, and the chef who suddenly fell ill, all of them are the biggest suspects. Yang Cheng walked at the back, and there was a glint in his eyes. He lowered his head slightly to control his expression to ensure that no one would notice his abnormality. If you want to play, then I'll play with you until the end. This time, I'm going to win this round. Since he had not done it before, he wanted to succeed. Yang Cheng enjoyed this process. He liked this kind of excitement. This was something that no other form of entertainment could give him. There's a ghost among the 12 visitors. Capture him, and we'll be able to solve this. Yang Cheng walked between his friends, Lao Zhou, and Duan Yu. After ensuring his own safety, he sneakily observed the two editors and Xiao Li. The boss of a haunted house never plays by the rules. Fan Chong and Fan Dade, who have already been killed, are probably ghosts. They disappeared early, but who knows, they might reappear somewhere and disguise themselves as the victims. Yang Cheng was very careful, and he kept perfecting the speculation in his heart. The lights on the wall gave off a dim yellow light. The iron door was half open, and there were water stains on the ground. Inside the room was a row of rusted morgues. Morgue number 1. The name was written on the side of the door. Huya glanced inside, and all the morgues were locked. Tails. She yelled into the room, but there was no answer. Tails wouldn't be hiding inside the morgues, right? The two editors walked around and found nothing. Then, the group continued to move forward. The morgues at Western Zhejiang Medical University were not arranged according to location but according to size and purpose. The visitors walked down the corridor for 3 minutes, and a half-open iron door appeared before them. Morgue number 5. The interior of all the morgues are similar. What is the boss's purpose for building so many morgues? He's not planning to hide the dead bodies, is he? Wang Yan touched the cold iron cabinets. This is similar to what I've seen in the textbooks. These morgues should be real. They're probably abandoned items from the frontline and have been collected by the boss. When he said that, his face did not look so good, and his voice sounded off. Something that was eliminated from the A list. Xiao Li mulled over Wang Yan's words, and his face slowly darkened. Doesn't that mean that these mortuary cabinets used to store corpses? That's right. Yang Cheng nodded. He stared at Xiao Li, trying to glean something from Xiao Li's expression, but to his disappointment, Xiao Li's reaction was normal. Based on my prediction, in another 10 seconds, the lights will go out. I suggest we stay in this room and don't wander off. We will continue to explore after the third darkness. There were all kinds of scary monsters lurking in the dark. Huya and Anan knew that Yang Cheng was doing this for everyone's sake, so they agreed. Time ticked by. It had been 4 minutes since the last time the lights went out, but the lights were still on. The group huddled together and turned to look at Yang Cheng. The lights haven't gone out, which means that the lights don't go out regularly. This means that the haunted house's boss is keeping an eye on us, and once he finds a loophole, he'll make his move. Yang Cheng wanted to say something else, but he was interrupted by the other visitors. Stop making pointless speculations. Huya shook her head. She turned to walk out. Follow me, we'll walk together. Don't be afraid of anything else. The editor of a horror magazine showed her decisive side. She pulled open the steel door and walked out. Anan jogged to follow behind her. This woman is quite interesting. Bai Cholan looked at Huya's back and coughed. Let's go. She's right. Most of the time, we're just scaring ourselves. There's no need for us to be so nervous. Don't forget, this is just a haunted house. It's just a place to scare people. Will there be real ghosts inside? Brother Bai is right. Xiao Li followed behind Bai Cholan. Let's go as well. Lao Zhou and Duan Yu were about to leave when Yang Cheng, who was at the back of the group, suddenly said in a very low voice, Lao Zhou, you and your wife better not follow the two editors. Why? Lao Zhou turned around. He felt like this medical student was being a bit weird. I can't be sure now, but remember what I said. After saying that, Yang Cheng led Li Shui and Wang Yan to walk ahead of Lao Zhou. We can't follow the two editors. Lao Zhou was deep in thought. When Yang Cheng walked past him, shock and understanding crossed his face, and he sucked in a cold breath. Could it be that there's something wrong with the two editors? Yang Cheng did not explain the details to Lao Zhou. The seed had been sown, and they only needed to wait for it to sprout. The lights in the corridor were not extinguished. The group passed morgue number 6 and morgue number 7, and they did not run into any danger. It was like the calm before the storm. Walking past morgue number 7, the corridor became colder, and the smell of formalin in the air thickened. The group reached the junction between the outer layer and the middle layer of the underground morgue. In the middle of the corridor was a half-demolished wall, and there was a lot of trash around the gap. There were wooden tables and chairs, broken railings, and several mannequins with twisted joints. This scenario isn't over yet. Wang Yan was wearing a short-sleeved shirt, and the cold air crawled into his shirt through the sleeves. The entrance to the next area was very narrow, and it was blocked by trash. It looked like a restricted area. Huya walked to the hole in the wall and shone her phone into it. She just wanted to see what was on the other side of the wall, but when the light shone into the hole, she suddenly saw a girl who looked like Tail holding the phone and crawling into one of the corridors. Tail. She's holding a phone. Who is she talking to? Huya's palm slammed on the wall, and she yelled at the hole, but there was only her voice echoing in the corridor. I think I see Tail. Anan, come help, move these things away. Huya grabbed the broken tables and chairs. Probably out of consideration for the visitors' safety, the edges of the tables and chairs were smooth, and they did not have sharp edges. It looked like they were often moved. Let's go help. Lao Zhou was kind. He, Bai Cholan, and Xiao Li all walked over to help clear the path for the two editors. The three medical students stood to the side, and Yang Cheng looked at Huya and Anan quietly with high alert. He did not believe what Huya said, and he felt like this was a trap that had been set up beforehand. I just got there, and I saw my missing partner. Isn't this too much of a coincidence? The more Yang Cheng looked at the three editors, the more suspicious he felt. The three of them had entered the haunted house later, so they probably did not sign the disclaimer. Furthermore, the three of them were editors for a thriller magazine, so they had a strong psychological endurance. This identity made it easier for them to pretend to be afraid. When I suggested following the human head, it was the male editor who insisted on going into the warehouse to investigate, and that led to the series of events that happened later. At the time, Bai Cholan had already warned them that there might be danger at the junction, but they still insisted on going to investigate. That in itself is very strange. When the chef and his brother were attacked at the corridor outside, the three editors were at the deepest part of the warehouse. It was like they knew that the visitors outside would be attacked and that something bad was going to happen, so they tried to distance themselves from it. Most importantly, there was clearly nothing in the warehouse, so how did Tails, one of the three editors, disappear? There is a hidden corridor behind the printer, but in this kind of situation, a normal person would not enter the hidden corridor alone. They would have screamed for help to attract their teammates. The woman called Tails probably purposely escaped from the corridor behind the printer. She created the illusion that she was missing so that her teammates would have the excuse to lead the way. What a flawless plan. Their teammates disappeared, and the remaining two editors were too emotional, so they did something rash. The other visitors couldn't blame them for that. Yang Chen's eyes gradually lit up. So, this is all part of their plan. No wonder I couldn't get through to Tails' phone. It's not like they said they lost the phone, but Tails didn't want to answer it from the beginning. There were too many suspicious points, and the actions of the three editors were too abnormal. From Yang Chen's perspective, there was only one logical explanation for their actions, and that was that the three editors were actually ghosts, sent by the haunted house's boss. I should have noticed them sooner. Cold sweat could be seen slipping down Yang Chen's forehead. I have not even heard of this magazine before. It is probably a random name. When we first entered the haunted house, the male editor volunteered to cooperate with me, but not long after we entered the haunted house, he made a different choice from me. Slowly, he replaced the three of us, and without us realizing it, he became the leader. With a lingering fear in her heart, Yang Cheng wiped away the sweat on her forehead. Thankfully, I was careful. This time, I won't be stupid enough to follow them to their deaths. Her eyes scanned the three editors, and Yang Cheng gripped her hands together. I need to figure out a way to expose them. This scenario is very big, like a maze. To enter the central hub in 30 minutes and avoid the attacks of the ghosts while finding the pictures is impossible. The haunted house boss wouldn't design a scenario that is impossible to clear, that would have lost the purpose of the game. If that's the case, then the key to clearing this underground morgue is related to the 5 pictures. Yang Cheng thought back to everything the boss had said. The 5 pictures of the victims can help us clear the scenario, but what kind of help can the pictures provide? Will holding the pictures prevent us from being attacked by the ghosts? The boss shouldn't have designed such a boring game. Excluding the talisman, what is the use of these 5 pictures? Quote. Before entering the haunted house, the boss emphasized the word, victims, which means that the people in the 5 pictures should be dead people. Yang Cheng's brain turned quickly, and he held his chin with one hand. 5 pictures of dead people. His eyes suddenly widened, and Yang Cheng's body shook violently, and a thought flashed through his mind. I know it now. The 5 people in the 5 pictures are probably my 5 teammates. They represent 5 dead people. They also represent 5 ghosts that have mixed into the team. Quote. His mind turned, and Yang Cheng felt like he finally understood the real gameplay of the underground morgue. The real requirement to clear the underground morgue is not to leave with the pictures but to find the 5 ghosts in the team. Those 5 photos are the most important hint. Quote. His heart was pounding, and Yang Cheng was excited. He had guessed the boss's plan and seen through the hidden rules of the game. OL, Yang, are you alright? Wang Yan saw Yang Cheng suddenly wave his fist in the air, and he was worried about the man's mental state. He suspected that he had been traumatized. Don't worry, this time, I will definitely help you clear the scenario. A smile appeared on Yang Cheng's lips, and his gaze was like a sharp knife that stared at the 2 editors. 5 pictures of the victims. So, the boss has given us a hint from the start. There are actually 5 ghosts hidden among the team. The last 6 visitors are new visitors, which means that of the 6 visitors, 5 of them are employees of the haunted house. The boss sure is going all out. Of the 12 visitors, 5 of them are ghosts. Who would have guessed that? Yang Chen scanned through the remaining 6 visitors who did not sign the agreement in his mind. The 3 editors are the most likely. I've never heard of that most scary magazine before, followed by the chef and his brother who suddenly got sick, and the last one is Xiaoli. After giving it some serious thought, Yang Cheng felt like he had understood everything. Xiaoli came in alone, and he is not familiar with the rest. If we exclude him, then there can only be one truth. The three editors, Fan Dade, and Fan Kong are all actors. Fan Dade suddenly acted up, and together with Fan Kong, they added to the scary atmosphere, causing the real visitors to fall into panic and self-doubt. Then, the three editors worked together to control the pace and drag the rest of the visitors into the abyss to experience the scare points that they had prepared beforehand. This is too scary, this haunted house is too crazy. The 5 people corresponded to the 5 pictures, which represented the 5 ghosts. Yang Cheng had confirmed the 5 ghosts' identities. He reached into his pocket to write a message to secretly send to Li Shui and Wang Yan. What are the 3 of you doing? Come and help, don't stay here for too long. The junction is the most dangerous place. Bai Cholan saw the 3 students freeze and yelled at them. Let's go and help. Li Shui felt uncomfortable. She and Wang Yan walked over to move the tables and chairs, slowly clearing a path. At that moment, Wang Yan, Li Shui, Xiao Li, Bai Cholan, and the 2 editors were on the outside of the corridor. Lao Zhou and his wife were on the other side, and Yang Cheng stood alone in the corner. He had been looking for a chance to expose the 2 editors in public. The tables, chairs, and old mannequins were moved away, and a few visitors walked down the corridor that had just been cleared. "Oh, Yang, come over here." Wang Yan saw Yang Cheng standing behind him, and he urged. He had no idea that Yang Cheng's heart was in turmoil, and he was having a mental battle. Why are you 2 in such a hurry? Yang Cheng yelled at Wang Yan. Before he could send the message, he was about to persuade Wang Yan and Li Shui to come back when the light next to him suddenly flickered. The light. Yang Cheng seemed to realize something, and he ran madly toward Wang Yan and Li Shui. Retreat to my side. Quick. The lights are going off. Quote. The lights in the corridor started to go off one after another, and this time, it was much faster than the previous 2 times. When Li Shui heard Yang Cheng's voice, she immediately ran toward Yang Cheng, but Wang Yan was quite far away from them. When he was halfway there, the light next to him went off. The corridor fell into darkness for the 3rd time. The thing that worried Yang Cheng was that they were at the border between the outer area and the middle area. No one knew what kind of monsters were hiding on the other side of the hole in the wall, and that was an unknown area. The boss turned off the lights when I was about to reveal the identity of the 5 ghosts. Could it be that he has already noticed that someone has guessed the identity of the 5 ghosts? If that's the case, then the victim this time might be me. Of all the visitors, that aloof Bai Cholan is the hardest to deal with, and other than him, it should be me. After visiting the haunted house many times, I've figured out the boss's routine. He will definitely treat me as his biggest threat and target me. A strong sense of danger surged in Yang Cheng's heart. He did not plan to sit and wait for death. He stood up, grabbed Li Shui, and yelled at the other side of the corridor, Wang Yan. Come to me. Quote. Shadows moved in the darkness, and liquid dripped from above their heads. A shadow was crawling over their heads. What is it? Wang Yan, who was halfway through his run, felt a cold and damp air rushing towards him. He stared blankly at the ceiling as his eyes slowly adjusted to the darkness. Just as he was about to take a closer look at the monster, someone tapped him on the shoulder. Shivering, Wang Yan subconsciously turned his head to look, but there was nothing there. Who's behind me? A drop of cold liquid fell on his neck. Wang Yan was startled. Before he could recover, someone patted his shoulder again. This time, he could clearly feel a hand on his shoulder. Got you. Wang Yan had a bad temper and wasn't good at reasoning and thinking. However, he was physically fit and had quick reflexes. Before that hand could withdraw, he directly grabbed it. The other party was deliberately scaring him at this time, which made Wang Yan a little angry. He grabbed the hand violently and flung it forward with all his might. With a flick of his arm, the hand was pulled before his eyes. 5 slender fingers interlocked with Wang Yan's fingers. Looking back, it was a clean palm and a jagged cut that appeared to have been made by a cleaver. It was a broken hand. It had been chopped off at the wrist, and Wang Yan was gripping this hand tightly in his palm. A hand. His mind froze for a second, and then Wang Yan was drowned in fear. Where did this hand come from? In the darkness, he shook his arm as hard as he could, and the air was stuck in his throat. Just as he was about to scream, the broken mannequins around him seemed to come alive, and they shone at Wang Yan. Wang Yan, who was completely dominated by fear, could not tell which direction to go. He screamed and ran instinctively toward the place where there were no mannequins. Wang Yan. When Yang Cheng heard his partner's voice, he immediately took out the phone from his pocket. When he swiped the screen and turned on the flashlight, the liquid on the ceiling dripped down, and thick darkness gathered above his head, forming a face that was hollowed out. It slowly approached, as if it was going to wrap around Yang Chen's head. With all his attention on Wang Yan, Yang Cheng did not notice the shadow above his head. Instead, it was Li Shui, who was next to him, who screamed. She staggered backward until she sat on the ground. Her body leaned against the wall, and she kept moving backward. Seeing Li Shui's reaction, Yang Cheng realized that he had been targeted as well. So, the real target of the haunted house's boss is me. The light from the phone flickered in the corridor, and the monsters formed from darkness appeared in large numbers. Don't panic. The darkness will only last for a while. Yang Cheng dodged to the side. He raised the phone and stood before Li Shui to protect her. Footsteps echoed down the corridor that was filled with junk. The visitors started to run in a certain direction in the darkness. Stay where you are. Stop. Hearing the messy footsteps, Yang Cheng finally realized that something was wrong. He believed that the haunted house's boss had noticed that some of the visitors had discovered the presence of ghosts among their group, so he had switched off the lights this time to disrupt the group of visitors and create a better environment for his employees. Yang Cheng screamed at the top of his lungs, but Wang Yan, who was already scared out of his wits, did not listen. He tried his best to shake his hand, but to his horror, the broken hand was exerting its own strength to hold on to him. The 10 fingers intertwined like they were glued to his palm. The monsters on the ceiling approached, and the mannequins around him seemed to come back to life. The human heads rolled on the ground, and Wang Yan stood alone in the middle of the pile of junk. He had lost the ability to think. Footsteps came from beside him. Some of the visitors in the group were running away. Wang Dan turned to the side. He followed the footsteps and tried to escape from the encirclement of the mannequins and the monsters above him. Who's running? Squat on the ground. Lean against the wall. Stay where you are. Huya and Anan were also yelling. They realized that there was someone purposely messing around in the group, trying to incite panic. The shadows swayed, and the lights did not come on. With the mannequins and monsters chasing after him, Wang Yan ran into the middle section. He had no idea how long he had been running with the visitors before him. In his memory, he had turned several corners, and now he could no longer turn back. After he calmed down, Wang Yan regretted his decision, but he did not have any other choice. The force on the palm grew stronger. He was a medical student, and the hand felt like human skin. However, there was no warmth, like it was a dead person's hand. Hiding from the mannequins and the monsters, Wang Yan suddenly heard Bai Chulin's shocked and angry voice. Who is it? Who is it? Quote. Then he heard Xiao Li's scream. Wang Yan knew that Xiao Li had been following behind Bai Cholan. What happened? What did they run into this time? There was a corner up ahead. Wang Yan leaned closer and saw 2 people lying in the corner. Xiao Li was lying in front, unconscious. Bai Cholan was lying at the back, and he was still conscious. He was waving at Wang Yan. He could not see the monster that had attacked the 2 visitors, and Wang Yan's heart was shaking. He did not dare go over, and he did not want to save the 2. However, he had no idea where he was. If he did not stay with the 2 visitors, he would be more likely to run into trouble if he went out alone. After hesitating for 2 seconds, Wang Yan bent down to catch his breath. He planned to squat next to Bai Cholan to ask about the situation. With his legs bent down, Wang Yan looked at Bai Cholan. His lips opened, but before he could say the sentence that he had prepared, he saw Bai Cholan's spine suddenly bend 90 degrees. The familiar head fell directly onto Wang Yan's body. Blood started to leak out from his orifices. A horrifying face stared at Wang Yan, and his lips kept repeating the same sentence. Give me back my hand. Wang Yan was so scared that he almost knelt down. His body leaned forward, and the sentence that he wanted to say was stuck in his throat. His whole face was purple. His eyelids rolled upward, and Wang Yan finally understood why Xiao Li had fainted. His body was moved, and his eyes opened a slit. Wang Yan saw several doctors in white coats standing around him. They were holding his name tag, and they appeared to be discussing something. Where am I? Is this a hospital? Wang Yan used all his strength to turn around and realized that he was lying on a bed with a clean sheet, and Xiao Li had been tossed on a random wooden board. You're awake. The four doctors surrounded Wang Yan's bed. From Wang Yan's perspective, it was quite scary. But, wasn't I visiting a haunted house? Wang Yan was not sure. He was scared out of his wits, and it took him a long time to remember who he was. We're the doctors at the haunted house. You fainted, and it was us who saved you. The doctors looked kind and easy to talk to. They seemed to treat Wang Yan very kindly. At Western Zhujiang's haunted house, the few doctors who were wrapped up were very kind to him, and that made Wang Yan's hair stand on end. Thank you. He looked at the doctors carefully and did not dare move. Can I leave now? Of course, keep your name tag with you. Don't lose it. The leading doctor placed Wang Yan's name tag lightly next to him. There's no problem with work and rest, but there has to be a limit to everything. After this visit, go back to school and focus on your lessons. The leading doctor seemed like he had not said these things to anyone for a long time. He sighed and felt lucky. I didn't expect that one day, I would be able to see them again and say these things to them. This familiar scene, why do I feel like my eyes are brimming with tears? Wang Yan also thought this was weird. These doctors in white coats were very kind to him, but they treated Xiao Li, who was also scared out of his wits. Have we met somewhere before? Wang Yan asked in a confused tone. He looked at the leading doctor and felt like he had seen him somewhere before. The leading doctor smiled, and his eyes were filled with kindness. Actually, the few of us. He coughed lightly, and the older doctor next to him waved his hand. Don't create trouble for Mr. Chen. Okay. The leading doctor's tone was rather dejected. Wang Yan had no idea what the doctors were talking about. He gripped the name tag tightly. I'm indeed a student at Western Zhujiang Medical University. Are the few of you seniors from my school? That can't be right. Today is a Wednesday. Every Wednesday morning, the medical university will have a big class, so there wouldn't be any seniors working part-time here. Quote. First year. Wednesday. The leading doctor was startled, and his brows slowly creased together. That reminds me. If I'm not mistaken, we should be in class now, right? The doctor's tone turned serious. Wang Yan's legs shook, and he was even more confused. He suddenly felt like he was facing his own school's teaching director. His voice was weak, and he said weakly, today is the opening of the haunted house's new scenario. I skipped class with a few students to come visit. Wang Yan had no idea what he was afraid of, but this fear was completely different from before. Skipping class. The leading doctor nodded, and his face tensed up. The atmosphere in the room turned heavy, and the four doctors radiated a deep chill. Skipping class as a first-year student. Aren't you afraid of being discovered by your teacher? Quote. I don't think so. This is the first time I've skipped class, Wang Yan stuttered, and he was getting more and more afraid. Don't scare him. The kind voice appeared again. This time, it was the older doctor. All right, I'll send you out of the scenario. After the visit, go back quickly. Don't delay your afternoon class. Then, the doctor turned to the side and yelled, and you, stop playing dead. Let's leave together. Xiao Li, who was lying on the ground, slowly opened his eyes. He smiled awkwardly and climbed up from the ground. I'll leave now. Sorry for disturbing you. Xiao Li and Wang Yan supported each other as they walked out of the sickroom. Looking at the complicated corridors outside, neither of them knew where to go. Picking a random direction, they had a feeling that they would be transported back to this place before long. Take the left path. When you run into a fork, take the middle path and enter the second room. There's a dresser in the room. Push it open, and the secret exit will be behind the dresser. The older doctor patiently pointed the way for Xiao Li and Wang Yan. After making sure that the two had memorized the route, he shook his head and returned to the room, closing the door. Thank you. Xiao Li dragged Wang Yan excitedly down the path. Finally, they could leave this place. The mission given by Mr. Mu had been tossed to the back of Xiao Li's mind. He only wanted to leave as soon as possible. Brother, what kind of background do you have? How come it feels like the few actors are very familiar with you? They seem to know you. Quote. I have no idea. Wang Yan shook his head. He felt like something was wrong. This is weird. The actors are advising people not to skip class. Are all the extras so professional? Isn't that a bit too positive? Quote. No matter what, I owe you one today. When Eastern Zhujiang's new theme park opens, it will be hard to get a ticket. I can help you get a few free tickets. Xiao Li patted his chest. Eastern Zhujiang's new theme park. Wang Yan shook his head. Forget it. Follow me, we'll talk after we get out of here. Okay. The two of them ran all the way to the room that the doctor had mentioned. There was a large morgue in the room, and there was a large hole in the middle of the morgue. It was filled with a viscous liquid that kept bubbling, as if something was hiding in the hole. This is the dresser. Xiao Li and Wang Yan worked together to push the dresser open. Behind it was a dark tunnel. The few doctors stood in the room. The tallest doctor looked at the oldest doctor with an unnatural expression. Elder Wei, why did you tell them about the hidden tunnel that leads to the central hub? Xiao Chen has set up more than 10 mannequins and traps inside the tunnel. Even I am scared. Quote. Skipping class in the first year. This is getting more and more out of hand. I have no idea how Xiao Zheng manages the school. One day, I must go back to take a look. The doctor called Elder Wei floated into the room alone. The other doctors looked at each other before turning to the oldest doctor. Elder Wei, will something bad happen to us? Something bad. With me, Wei Jukan, as long as he has one breath left, I can save him. I want to use this student to tell the other students at Western Zhujiang that this is the consequence of skipping class. Quote. Wang Yan looked at the hidden path behind the cupboard, and his heart fluttered. The few doctors gave him a weird feeling. Initially, they were kind and friendly, but after they heard that he was skipping class, their tone and attitude changed. Did I say something wrong? Skipping class is not that big of a deal, right? A university without skipping class is incomplete. Many seniors have said that before. Quote. Stopping at the entrance of the hidden path, Wang Yan took one step into it. The temperature inside the path was much higher than outside. He hesitated for a long time before retreating. What's wrong? Xiao Li followed closely behind him. He could not wait to leave. It's nothing. I just feel like the few doctors earlier are a bit like our teaching director. Wang Yan's emotions were complicated. This is so strange. I've thought about all kinds of scary things, but I've never thought I would run into a teacher while skipping class. Could it be that there are too many visitors to Mr. Chen's haunted house, and the teachers are worried that it will affect our studies, so they purposely came to catch us? Fine, this is your first time skipping class, right? It's normal to be nervous. You'll get used to it after a few more times. Xiao Li urged Wang Yan to leave. We fainted at the same time. You were placed on the bed with 2 layers of mattresses, and I was tossed directly onto the wooden board. From their attitude toward us, it's clear that the few doctors should be familiar with you. They wouldn't lie to you. I also feel like they are familiar, but I have no memory of them at all. The hole in the middle of the pool kept bubbling, and the lights on the wall flickered. The steel doors in the corridor creaked like someone was pushing them back and forth. Under such circumstances, Wang Yan did not dare waste too much time. He was afraid that the monsters would come after him again if the lights went out. Come on, if you're afraid, I'll walk in front, and you just need to show me the way. Xiao Li had been working for many years. He was the bravest worker at the futuristic theme park, and he stepped forward bravely. Wang Yan did not reject Xiao Li's kindness. He moved aside and watched as Xiao Li entered the hidden path. Be careful. I know. Xiao Li took out his phone and turned on the flashlight that came with the phone. Let's hurry up and leave. I don't want to see those doctors the next time I open my eyes. The two of them entered the secret passage one after the other. The passage became narrower the further they went, and the walls were covered with blood-red moss-like things. Why isn't it over yet? The more Wang Yan walked forward, the more anxious he became. The secret passage only allowed one person to pass through sideways, and his clothes inevitably rubbed against the moss on the side. His clothes were wet and his skin was a little itchy. He followed behind Xiao Li, feeling very uneasy. This should be the way to the outside. Contrary to Wang Yan, Xiao Li was very confident. Have you noticed that the smell of formalin in the air is almost gone? There is a very fresh scent in this corridor. His nose twitched, and Wang Yan did smell the scent, but he was not as optimistic as Xiao Li. Is it coming from the moss on the wall? He reached out to touch the wall. The cold wall was covered in moss, and it was soft to the touch. Finally, I don't have to smell that weird smell anymore. This path should lead directly to the outside world. The existence of the secret passage is probably to make it easier for the visitors to exit. After all, a normal person would not be able to handle this haunted house, and the existence of the secret passage is equivalent to a surprise, like now. Xiao Li bent down, and the corridor became much shorter. The ground became softer like it was covered with a thick layer of carpet. I still think formalin smells more familiar. The scent that lingered at the tip of his nose made Wang Yan want to vomit. This is not a normal scent, and it doesn't feel like a man-made chemical scent either. It smells very strange. Wang Yan tried his best to think, and he finally remembered. When I was reading the history of vindication, it introduced a type of cadaveric incense, and the description of cadaveric incense is very similar to this scent. Cadaveric incense. Xiao Li shivered. This was the first time he had heard of something like that. There are many types of cadaveric incense, and the most famous one is to use the body of a beauty to make wax. After a special process, it is lit inside the house. Stop. Stop it. Xiao Li hastened his footsteps, and he started to keep his distance from Wang Dan. Normal people would still avoid talking about corpses, and they would not be like medical students who talked about things that went too far. Xiao Li from the futuristic theme park walked forward with his back bent, and Wang Yan had no choice but to follow behind him. The two of them walked for about 10 meters when Xiao Li, who was in front, suddenly stopped. What do you see? Wang Yan used his phone to shine the light in front of him. Xiao Li stood where he was, and after a long time, he said, "It's a dead end." The two were bent over, and they were almost lying on the ground. The corridor was very narrow, and it was difficult to even turn around. Everywhere was covered in red moss. Their clothes were wet, and the air was filled with that strange scent. Then, should we go back the way we came? Wait a minute. Xiao Li was indeed brave. He raised his hand to press on the red moss before him. His fingers tightened, and his palm slowly sank in. The back of this place is empty. Xiao Li cursed silently. There was a test like this at the exit. Thankfully, I gave it a try. If I had retreated earlier, my intestines would have turned green with regret. He was very proud of himself. He turned around to tell Xiao Li the good news. His body was stuck to the wall, and Xiao Li turned his neck with great effort. The moss is purposely used to hide us. The exit is just ahead, and we will be able to. At this point, Xiao Li's eyes swept behind him. He saw Xiao Li, and at the same time, he saw the people crawling behind Xiao Li. Without making a sound, as they crawled, their faces fell, and they were all following behind them. What are you looking at? Wang Yan used the phone to shine the light on Xiao Li's face. Before he could get a clear look, when the light from the phone swept past, a pale arm dangled down from the moss above his head. The dangling arm landed before Wang Yan's face. He looked up blankly, and the arms fell from above his head. The narrow corridor was covered by the soft red moss, and under the moss were the corpses that had been prepared the night before. At the edge of the middle area, Yang Cheng, Li Shui, Lao Zhou, and Duan Yu stood together. The four of them looked at the two editors who were 2 meters away from them. 3 of them have disappeared, so how come the 2 of you are still alive? Yang Cheng's voice was suppressed. He had seen through the boss's trick and knew the real identity of the 2 editors. What does their disappearance have to do with us? Anan felt like Yang Cheng had lost his mind. When the lights went off and the footsteps started, I even warned them not to wander around, but they refused to listen. Now that they've disappeared, you're here to blame us. You're still trying to deny it. He could vaguely hear Wang Yan and Xiao Li's screams from the depths of the passage. He could even vaguely hear them saying that they would never skip class again. Their hoarse screams and heart-wrenching pain definitely couldn't be faked. It was because he heard Wang Yan's screams that Yang Cheng started to panic. He did not plan to hide anymore and decided to expose everything. We're trying to deny it. Huya frowned. Have you misunderstood something? Stop acting. I've seen through your trick. Now that I think about it, you guys sure are professional. Yang Cheng took a step forward to shield Li Shui and Lao Zhou behind him. You guys should be the haunted house's actors, right? This was arranged by Mr. Chen, right? Quote. Huya and Anan's lips twitched. In the end, it was Anan who could not hold it in anymore. He looked at Yang Cheng and whispered, "What's wrong with you? Are you angry? You didn't expect that, right? I only used 19 minutes to find you." Yang Chen stood next to Ol, Zhou and the rest, and his voice turned cold. The three of you editors and the chef and his brother who disappeared earlier are all actors at the haunted house. The 5 pictures of the 5 victims should be the 5 of you. You are the ghosts that have mixed into the group of visitors, you are the dead victims. Quote. The place was quiet. Not only Huya and Anan, even Lao Zhou and Duan Yu sucked in a cold breath. How were they supposed to answer that? This was a situation that they had not considered. You suspect that there are haunted house actors among the visitors. Someone is playing us. The 2 editors seemed to have realized the problem as well. The 2 of them had read a lot of horror and suspense novels, so their logical thinking was stronger than the average person. Because they had never encountered such a situation before, they didn't think about it at all. But with Yang Chen's reminder, the 2 of them instantly understood something. The ghost is among us. Cold sweat slid down, and Anan stood next to Huya. Listen to me, there really seems to be a ghost among us, but this ghost is not the 3 of us but someone else. Yes. Huya thought about it. The ghost should be that Bai Cholan. When he came in, I thought it was weird. Why did the man keep his hands inside his pockets? At the time, I thought it was his habit, but now that I think about it, there is a big problem with the man. Earlier, when the accident happened, Bai Cholan also disappeared, and the footsteps were messy, so it was probably him who was messing around. Earlier, when the accident happened to the chef and his brother, Bai Cholan was standing at the storeroom door. He separated the door from the inside, and at the crucial moment, he bought time for the monster. Quote. This man is very suspicious. He should be a ghost, and he must have a companion. Anan's mind was clearer. His way of thinking was different from Yang Cheng's. He did not carry any emotion when he looked at each visitor, he merely analyzed them rationally. If Bai Cholan is a ghost, his companion wouldn't act like they are familiar with him, so Xiao Li's suspicion can be eliminated. Of the remaining people, other than those who have already been harmed, the rest are all here. Anan's eyes wandered between Lao Zhou and Yang Cheng. Both sides were too deceptive, and he had a hard time figuring them out. Duan Yu grabbed Lao Zhou's hand and asked softly, "What's going on?" I'm not sure, but there seems to be an actor from the haunted house among the 2 groups. Lao Zhou lowered his head to answer Duan Yu. They were very close to Yang Cheng, and their conversation was overheard by Yang Cheng. Trust me, these 2 are the real actors at the haunted house. I have the decisive evidence. Yang Chen silently told Ol, Zhou about the disclaimer. When the 2 heard it, they were quite shocked. Anan and Huya originally thought that Yang Cheng was not that suspicious, but when they saw how confident Yang Cheng was and Lao Zhou's reaction when he heard what Yang Cheng said, their confidence was shaken again. They could not hear what Yang Cheng said, but they felt that something was wrong. There's a ghost among the group. It's too dangerous to stay with them. We should go and find Tail ourselves. Huya walked in a certain direction. When I reached the junction, I saw Tail heading this way. The 2 editors did not linger and left immediately. They know they can't keep up the act. Li Shui chimed in for Yang Cheng. No matter what happened, she had absolute trust in Yang Cheng. It's not a bad idea to split up. We should use this chance to look for the pictures before they do anything. Yang Cheng chose the opposite direction from the 2 editors and led Lao Zhou and Duan Yu deeper into the corridor. 4 screams came from somewhere in the scenario. The first 2 were from Lao Zhou and Duan Yu. They sounded like they had run into something scary. The last 2 were from Yang Cheng and Li Shui. Other than fear, there was also a deep sense of despair in their voices. 4 screams came at the same time. Huya and Anan had not gone far, so they heard them clearly. All 4 were killed. Anan was shocked. His earlier speculation seemed to be wrong. Based on his earlier speculation, the remaining ghost should be between him and Huya, but how was that possible? Now, it's just the two of us. Huya's smile was forced. A team of 12 is now down to 2, and it only took 20 minutes. This boss sure knows how to read people. Perhaps there was no ghost among us from the beginning. Anand shook his head. His mind was a mess. He felt like he was trapped in a maze. Not only his body, even his mind was trapped. Ignore them. We need to find Tail first. I remember she's in this direction. Huya and Anand carefully moved forward. They reached the end of the corridor and saw a closed iron door. This door isn't locked. Probably due to his agitation, Anand shook the door hard. Someone purposely used something to block it. Could it be Tail's doing? That's possible. The iron door shook, and the lights on the wall flickered like they were going to go out again. Tail hid in an unknown room at the end of the corridor. She hugged her phone and pressed the number madly. Why isn't anyone answering? Quick, answer it. Quote. The iron door was shaken, and the rust peeled off. It created a loud noise. Tail's heart raced, and her baby face was as white as paper. Her fingers gripped the phone tightly, and the veins on her neck bulged. She was really afraid. Those things are coming. It has to be them. Quote. The iron door shook even harder. She was so anxious that she was about to cry. Her body curled up inside the cupboard, and her pupils narrowed as she stared at the gap. What should I do? What should I do? Quote. Bang. The table and chairs behind the door were pushed over, and the iron door finally opened. Her heart jumped to her throat, and Tail almost lost her breath. She bit on her lips, gripped her hands, and stared at the door. Tail. A familiar voice came from the door, and Tail was stunned. Happiness came too suddenly, and she couldn't believe it was real. The lights in the corridor were going off, and she could only see the silhouette of the person at the door. She was sure that it was Huya. Her hand on the cupboard door, and tears fell from Tail's eyes. She was so excited. This feeling of flying from hell to heaven was indescribable. However, just as she was about to push open the cupboard door, the phone screen lit up. The call that had been blocked earlier was finally connected, and it was Huya. Isn't she at the door? Tail's fingers answered the call subconsciously, and it was Huya's anxious voice on the other end. Tail, we've already left the haunted house. Stay where you are and don't move. The police will go in to find you. There's something wrong with this haunted house. Remember to stay where you are and don't move. Do not move. Quote. Leave. The police. Tail listened to the familiar voice on the phone and looked at the familiar silhouette at the door, and she was stunned. On the phone, Huya had said that she had left the haunted house, so who was the person standing at the door? The lights went off, and darkness fell. Tails curled up behind the cupboard, shivering. Even the workers did not have the heart to bully her. Her eyes were watery, and she bit on her lips. She hugged her arms and did not dare to breathe too loudly. Huya hung up. The phone returned to normal, and the room sank into silence. Several seconds later, footsteps came. Someone entered the room. The soles of the shoes rubbed against the gravel, and Tails could hear it clearly every time it landed. Bang! The first cupboard closest to the door was violently pulled open, and the smell of disinfectant wafted out. Not here. Huya's voice sounded different from normal. Who knew what she had been through at this haunted house for her emotions to be so unstable? Bang! The door of the second cupboard was also pulled open. Their actions were rough, and some of the cupboard doors were rusted. Together, they yanked the door open. The sound came closer and closer to Tails. She was hiding behind the last cupboard. As long as they moved to the side, they would be able to see her. Let's go. This might be a trap. If she hears us, there's no reason for her not to answer unless she's already fainted. Anand and Huya opened 4 cupboards, but they did not see Tails, so they gave up. Where can she go? Huya looked deeper into the room. There was a gap between the last cupboard and the wall. It was just big enough for a small person to hide inside. She took 2 steps toward it, and when she was close, her phone vibrated. She had received a message. It's from Tails. Opening it, Tails said that she was trapped in a secret passage full of red moss. The passage was in a room with a mortuary pool. Don't be afraid, we'll be there in a minute. Huya remembered there was such a room in the middle floor. She stopped moving and called Tails' number before leaving the room with Anand. The footsteps disappeared, but Tails still did not dare come out. She could not make up her mind, so she called Huya again. However, this time, she did not get through. The alert told her that the line was busy, and Huya seemed to be talking to someone else. The person who looks like Sister Huya seems to have called someone, but when I call her number, the line is busy. What's going on? Tail took her phone and slowly walked out of the room. She followed the two editors who left in a hurry. Pulling open the heavy iron door, Chen Ge put on his clothes and entered the underground morgue. He found a trolley from the storage room and slowly entered the underground morgue. One car should be enough. With the cadavers from Western Zhejiang Medical University controlling the situation, there shouldn't be too many people fainting this time. Chen Ge continued to move forward with a smile. My biggest reward from completing the trial mission at the underground morgue is these few doctors. With them around, the safety of the haunted house's visitors will be greatly guaranteed. At the end of the tunnel, a ball-shaped object was bouncing on the spot, as if it was waiting for Chen Ge. Seeing the ball-shaped object, Chen Ge was not afraid. Lead the way. The ball-shaped object was the mannequin head that Chen Ge had taken from the underground morgue. The mannequin had stayed in the autopsy room for more than 10 years. It had been touched by the students every day, and it had slowly become more and more evil. However, the mannequin did not have any evil intentions. It was merely used to being alone and wished to find some friends. That was what Yan Danian had told Chen Ge. During the mission, Chen Ge had tossed the mannequin head together with the comic, recorder, and white cat. At the time, they had had a great time, and Chen Ge had taken in this homeless mannequin head. With the mannequin head leading the way, Chen Ge first found Fan Dade and Fan Kong, who were lying in the middle of the road. The two brothers appeared to be unconscious, like they did not know whether they should wake up or not. It's already a great improvement that they didn't faint. No wonder they're visitors who have been through a 2-star scenario. Chen Ge used some effort to place the two brothers on the cart. The wheels rolled, and Chen Ge arrived at the middle section. Yang Cheng and Li Shui were placed neatly by the wall. Perhaps worried that the ground would be too hard, someone had even thoughtfully placed something under their heads. The service was very good. Not bad, this is how you should treat your visitors. While scaring them, you have to let them feel the care and concern. After receiving Chen Ge's praise, 3 shadows crawled out from the corridor and slipped into the comic. These two are the work of Lao Zhou's group. Chen Ge placed Li Shui on the cart. Looking at the fainted Yang Cheng, he shook his head. You've finally experienced it. This time, you've met a real employee. After putting the 4 down, the cart was full. Chen Ge found a cart that came with the morgue, and with the mannequin's lead, he came to the entrance of the middle section's hidden tunnel. There really are people running into this place. How can there be so many shortcuts in life? Quote. Mr. Chen bent down to enter the tunnel, and he saw Tails first. The girl was fainted on the ground. Probably afraid that she would fall, a mannequin was lying on the side to support her. The 3 editors came together, so there should be more inside. The deeper Chen Ge walked, the weirder his expression became. This batch of visitors seemed to have gone mad, and they rushed into his carefully designed trap one after another. Are all visitors nowadays so wild? After dragging all 5 out, Chen Ge looked at the 2 filled carts, and he felt quite embarrassed. This shouldn't be. Before the visitors came in, I told the doctors to save the fainted visitors. Chen Ge pushed the 2 carts out. Looking at the visitors, he suddenly sucked in a cold breath. This is bad. I forgot to tell them to send them to the entrance after they wake up. Don't tell me the doctors have saved them multiple times. It was too late to talk about that now. Chen Ge quickly pushed the visitors to the room that Wei Juqing and the rest were in. He did a simple check on the visitors, and after confirming that they were fine, he pushed the 2 carts away from the underground morgue. When the thick curtain of the haunted house was pulled back, the noise outside slowly quieted down. The visitors seemed to have lost their ability to speak, and they all turned to look at the entrance. The wheels rolled, and Chen Ge pushed the 2 carts of visitors out into the sunlight. The afternoon sun fell on him, and the smile on his face was the same as before. His powerful arms held the handles of the carts, and the passengers on the carts looked peaceful as well. Shoo, I'll leave the rest to you. They're not in mortal danger, and I've already had people check them. They'll wake up after some rest, so don't worry. Placing the two carts before Shu Shu, Chen Ge waved at the visitor next to him. Many haunted houses on the market use horror as a gimmick to attract visitors, but my haunted house is different. Our haunted house values the safety of our visitors the most, so come visit without worry. We have the best service, and to make it easier, we even have professional doctors and various tools to transport the visitors. Don't worry, we're not like other unscrupulous attractions, we won't charge extra. Quote.